Hello everyone, welcome to a new tutorial presented by DSA Charles BB. In this tutorial, we are going to learn how to initialize variables. So we first start with the percentage sign. We need to know that the percentage sign, like in LaTeX, this percentage sign is used to show a comment in Octave programming, unlike a double front slash last used in C and C++ programming. So percentage sign variable just shows that this line is going to be a comment, and that the interpreter is not going to visualize it as a code. Now let's start with the subject matter. Variables. So we first need to know what are variables. Variables are any entity which are created in a memory space in order to contain values. Now we need to know that in C and C++, variables. So we need to know that in C and C++, variables exist as integers, exist as floating numbers or decimal points, exist as characters, exist as strings. In C, you have addition of strings. It can also exist as booleans. Booleans, when you are using the conditional statement, anything that you place in the bracket of if or the else if or the else are going to come out as boolean expression, and anything you are placing inside the while loop or the for loop or the do while loop are going to come out as boolean expression of either 1 or 0. So that comparison is either true, which is 1, or false. If I say if x greater than 1 and actually x is equals to 3, you see that 3 is greater than 1, so that expression x greater than 1 only come out as 1 because it's true. So it's if 1, then it's going to enter into the statement of the if of that particular if loop. So we have all this type of data type inside C and C++. But Octave programming has reduced all this format not for you not to be disturbed by all this data in all this declaration of data types. So you need to know that in C and C++, a particular word is used. You have declaration of variables. But here in Octave programming, there is no declaration of variables because the Octave program considers the variable as already being declared as being an imaginary declaration. So what you only do there is to initialize value. And what is initialization? Initialization is just to place a value inside. It's just to place a value inside that particular variable. Need to know that normally in C and C++, what happens is that you do int, let's say variable 1. So you have int variable 1. Now when you have int variable 1, the next thing you need to do again on another line is to still do variable 1 equals to, let's say, 20. So you have this. When you have int variable 1, this first line is used to be a declaration. This next line is used as an initialization. Now this first line is not considered in Octave programming. It's only in C and C++ that there's a need for you to first start with a declaration of variable. But here I consider Octave as having an imaginary declaration where you don't need again to declare the values. What you only need to do is to initialize. So in Octave program, we are not going to speak about declaration. We are just going to say how to initialize variables. Now the next thing again to put in your mind is, if we don't declare a variable as being integer, floating number, character, string, or boolean, how will Octave know that a particular variable is of any type? This will only be visualized when you are going to enter a particular value. Let's say I enter x. I say x is equals to 20. When I say x equals to 20, what happens is that Octave takes 20 as being an integer. So it is going to store, it's going to create now a variable x of integer type and imaginary, so you don't need again to declare it. So what it's going to do is going to do an imaginary declaration of this variable x of an integer type because of the value of enter, which is an integer. This is why when I enter, you see answer equals 20. 20 does not have floating number, it does not have decimal point, so it actually shows that Octave has stored this as an integer value. Now let's take again instead y equals to 34.89. So let's say we have this y equals 34.89. What happened in this case is that 34.89 is a floating number. So what Octave does is that it creates an imaginary declaration of the y as being a floating type and then place a value into it. This is why when I press enter here, you see that the value come out as being 34.890. So you have this. You can still do with character. If I want that, I say name. So I want that my name should be shown to you. So what I can do, I can either use for characters, if it's one character, it's a good attitude when it's a character, only use one letter. We have S. You see that when I'm going to place a single quote, it's going to consider it as character here. So what happens is that it's going to create an imaginary declaration of name as being character and then place the letter S into it. So when I press enter, you have name is equals to S. So this is letter. I can now have name, let's say name is equals to, I place double quote, I place now my name, D SCHRDBB. Now when you have name equals to the SHRDBB, this double quote consider it as a string. So what happens is that it's going to do an imaginary declaration of name and place it into as a string and then place the value the SHRD into it. So what happens when I press enter, I have this. So this is how Octave program consider our different variables. So there is no need for you to declare. It does an automatic declaration for you depending on the values which are being entered into the Octave program. Now before we stop this tutorial, we are first going to know how to create a good variable. For you to write a good variable, it's always necessary not to use special signs to write variables. Special signs such as, you have special signs such as this. So you should not use these special signs in order to write a variable. The next thing is that a variable must not start with a number. So a variable must not start with a number. So this is another thing, but a number can be used either, but it can be used either in the middle or at the end of the variable name. Now this does not only account for variables, it can also account for all identifiers. Identifiers are just anything which are going to represent an entity in a program. So if you want to write the name of a function, it's always good to respect this format, not to use special characters and not to start with the number, and either the numbers can be used either at the middle or the end. As you have seen here, I've written variable 1 somewhere here. Yeah, variable 1 can be used at the end here. Now another format again is so. When you want to write, you can use with small and you can use letters of the alphabet, capital and small letters. And you need to know that Octave program is a case sensitive program, so that's why it's not going to consider variables which have uppercase letters as being the same as the variables having lowercase letters. Now the last thing again to note is that when you want to do a good variable, you can space the different words of your variable with an underscore or by a capital letter of the next word. Example, if you want to say my area can be written as such. I can say my area, I write it as such, or I can still do my variable as my area as such. So these are the different ways to write the variables now inside Octave. Lastly, in Octave programming, when you want to assign the values of a variable you want to assign numbers now to variable, always place the variable on the left hand side. As so let's say I want to say area or length. I say length equals to 20. Now if I don't want that this length equals to 20, you see that length equals to 20 is going to be returned as length equals to 20. Now if I don't want that, the first thing to know that if I want to retrieve this length equals to 20, I should press the upper, you see the upper arrow sign. You have the upper and the lower arrow sign. You see when I press upper arrow sign, it goes up, and lower arrow sign goes down. So I have length equals to 20. Now if I don't want that length equals to 20, it should be shown again to me as being interpreted. I just use a semicolon as such. So you see length equals to 20 is stored in the memory, but it's not shown to me. I have again another one, width equals to 20, width equals to, now let's say 10, is shown to me. And now then I continue and I say area is equals to length times the width. You see that now this semicolon can serve to change a script format to a bulk format. You see that now I'm capable of writing multiple lines of code now on one line. So you see it can change to have semicolon here, and I paste semicolon here, I have this. So you have area is equals to length times width. Now lastly I can say area. Now if I want to see the value of area, I just write area here and I press enter. You see now area is going to be this length times this width is going to be 20. It's given to you. So this will mark the end of variables in Octave programming. Thanks for your kind attention.